radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. How you doing? Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? How you doing? It's Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? All right. I know you've been waiting for this. Tonight's the night. We have very special guest contactee Chris Bledsoe is here for the very first time. He'll be with us at the bottom of the hour. Tomorrow night, Richard Bleepin' Dolan. That's what I'm talking about. Wow, what a great week. Jim Goodall last night, Chris Bledsoe tonight, Richard Dolan tomorrow, Thursday night, Jason Quitspiracy Part 2. Man. And then we jump in the car and we head to Vegas. That's right. Oh, man. I can't do it, but I would love to take next week off. Can't do it, though. Can't do it. Not gonna do it. Can't do it. Somebody sent me an email today that said, Jimmy, you have done over 1,000 shows, and in those 1,000 shows, you say hither and thither, that you are saying it wrong. And that it's supposed to be thither. Now, let me explain something to you. That intro, which will never change, but the hither and thither, to and fro, I'm going to tell you where I got it from. You guys want me to share that with you? You want me to tell you where I stole it from? Because I'm okay with that. I mean, I steal everything. But do you want to know where I stole hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth? Do you want to know who I stole it from? Because I did. I stole it. I'm waiting. I'm going to watch Twitter here. I want somebody to go and say, yeah, Jimmy, we want to know. Okay? And then I'll let you know. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. That's right, hither and thither. At JChurchRadio. At JChurchRadio. The sandbox is hashtag F2B on Twitter. On Twitter. Hashtag F2B on Twitter. Hashtag F2B on Twitter. That is the sandbox. Love hanging out with all of you guys. And where am I at? Hashtag F2BQ is Fade to Black questions. You can also email throughout the show, jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Oh, I don't want... Okay, so Cassandra in Twitter says, yeah, go ahead, whatever, tell us. Hither and thither, to and fro, comes from the movie Fear of a Black Hat. That's right. Fear of a Black Hat. And if you haven't seen Fear of a Black Hat, absolutely one of the funniest movies ever made. Very, very funny. Controversial. Fear of a Black Hat. Watch the movie. There is a scene in the movie where one of the rappers in the band is down in his bunker showing off his gun collection. And he says to the host, the interviewer in this documentary, her name is Nina Blackburn, a take of Nina Blackwood off of MTV. That's another story. And he says, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth. And the way that he says it, it is so funny. And it's just like, man, I stole it. I stole it. So there it is. See, I just came clean. I came clean. That's where that comes from. So it will always be thither. And if you're going to send me an email that says something like that in it and you don't know where the humor comes from and you haven't seen the movie, that's not on me. It's Black Hat, not Black Cat. Fear of a Black Hat is the name of the movie. Fear of a Black Hat. And if you haven't seen it, this audience, you got to get inside my head. And you guys are close. You guys are close. You are inside my head. You guys know what I'm going to say before I'm going to say it. You've listened to way too many shows, and we hang out too much. But Fear of a Black Hat. And if you haven't seen it, that's it. That's your required viewing for the night. Rita, pop up a link to Fear of a Black Hat. Nina. Fear of a Black Hat. Did you pop up a picture of Nina? There she is. Oh, my God. Nina, yeah. Well, that's Nina. That's Nina Blackwood. Nina Blackburn. I wonder how old Nina was here. She was probably 40. She looked younger, but she was probably 40 because I think today somebody should find out because I'm sure she is. Thither sounds better. Seen Fear of a Black Hat. Good for you. See, Tarana, you get me. Yeah, there you go. Old English pronunciation. On January 8th, 2007, Chris Bledsoe Sr. came face-to-face with extraterrestrial beings and had missing time. Although he wouldn't recall the details of that first terrifying encounter until hypnosis a year and a half later. While on the banks of the Cape Fear River, Chris, his son Chris Jr., and 3 of his subcontractors discovered they were about to experience the most harrowing day of their lives involving unexplained phenomena, leading them to believe this was the end of the world. We'll be discussing all of this tonight. MUFON then sent their highest trained team to investigate the encounter, only to attempt to debunk and ridicule the Bledsoe family. Their experience was featured on the Discovery Channel's 2008 series UFOs Over the Earth, the Fayetteville Incident. Multiple 3-letter agencies have been involved with the Bledsoe case, bringing increased attention and mystery to this ever-evolving story. He currently lives in North Carolina with his wife and 4 adult children nearby. And I am really looking forward to this conversation tonight, and I would like everybody to welcome, for the first time to Fade to Black, Chris Bledsoe. Chris, good evening, man. How you doing?
Doing great, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. But you know what, Chris? You get the first-time guest disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way first. which is this. And do you like my nervous laugh? I hope you just shifted in your seat a little bit, like what's all this about. But the first-time guest disclaimer is this. Chris, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. See? That was easy. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Next time you're on the show, you don't get the first-time guest disclaimer. So enjoy this moment. Okay, let's zen out together, but it's going to be fun. This is your case. Which is ongoing, and we had a little conversation before the show tonight. We don't need to discuss that, but it's obviously ongoing all the way up to showtime tonight, right? So, which it's caught the attention of quite a few people, and when you get into this community like you have been, and you've been embraced, and that's been awesome. But you have to discuss these things, and this involves your family and your kids and your home and your neighbors and your town. And the next thing you know, you're that guy. How has it been for you? Are you better now discussing these subjects than when things kicked off back in 2007?
Absolutely. 100% has totally changed from the general population. The public's changed their perception of this thing, and people back then was totally. It's just changed. People are more accepting, is what I've found, and I'm just coming public for the first time in like 8 years. This Richard Dolan and yourself, So,
well, what about your neighbors? Are you the UFO guy on the block? Right? You know what I mean? What's that like when you go out and get your mail in the morning?
Well, what makes it bad is I was a pretty popular guy in town because my father was a well-known builder. My wife's father was a well-known builder, and I took. I went into their foot tracks, and continued that building. And it was such that Raleigh, which is 60 miles away, their general, like WRAL TV, they would send their people just to get my opinion on the economy of building and such. So I was really well known. And when it all happened, I thought the whole world would want to know. And after I told it, I found out real quick. I became everybody's whisper, everybody making fun, thinking I'm crazy. And it was awful. It has been, but things are much better now.
Describe for me, because we're going to be discussing this throughout the night tonight. Tell me about your neighborhood, and what's the lay of the land there?
Well, it's Fort Bragg, North Carolina, so there's like 60,000 enlisted soldiers or somewhere thereabout, and it's a very big retirement area for the VA because of, several veterans hospitals here. And me being a builder and advertising, my company name was Bledsoe Home Builders, and we built 100 homes a year, close to it, or more at times. And so I was well known by everyone. And it's flat land. We're in the coastal plain, which is flat. You go towards Bragg, west of us, about 20 miles, and you start getting into the Piedmont, they call it, or the Sand Hills. But it's generally Fayetteville, North Carolina is a small town, and it's growing now. But I would say there's 250,000 people. That's
city status, right? That's that's getting up there. 250,000 is a pretty big metropolitan area, and of course, Fort Bragg is not small. That's one of the biggest military installations in the country, no doubt, right?
Absolutely, and the towns join it. It's like anywhere else. The surrounding towns, like Lumberton, is 20 miles away, but it's all beginning to join together. And so I would say in a state of 13 million people or 12.5 million people, there's a whole lot of them between us and Raleigh. I mean, we're right in the middle of it. Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, all the way to Wilmington is pretty crowded. So there's a lot of people that know this story in this area.
And also, I've been through there many, many times. I've stayed at Chapel Hill. I've stayed on the campus. And it is, it's for the United States, it's old. It's established. The families have been there for a long time, for generations. There are, for the large part, I would say, pretty wealthy, right? I mean, it's got all demographics there, but it is a beautiful. You drive through there and you just see America, don't you?
Yes, sir. It's the Research Triangle Park. You have major schools like NC State, the Wolfpack, the Tar Heels, Chapel Hill, Wake Forest, Duke University. Is all within an hour and a half of where I live. And Wilmington is in the south from me, only an hour and a half away. So we're kind of right in the middle.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to go through those hills and just drive in the trees. And it's like, wow, there's Duke. Oh, Raleigh, Durham. Oh, we're here. At Chapel Hill. It's just, and it's all right there. It's a beautiful part of the country, but it's also because of where Fort Bragg is. I think that may have something to do with your case. We'll discuss that later. But to have this kind of paranormal activity, and it's not just UFOs, is it? Or an ET presence. There's a lot of things that have been going on. And as we get into the details of this, do you think, Chris, that all of this is connected? That it's not a separate series of events, that everything is related to each other?
Absolutely. And I've maintained that position for more than 13 years. And, a lot of people back then was all nuts and bolts. And honestly, I got basically ostracized from the UFO community because I'm talking spiritual and they're talking nuts and bolts. And so that was a pretty downer when the community, basically, I just lost every friend I had because of the way they were making fun of myself. And my children would go to school and they would get called up front. That happened more than once, and question about their dad, and their friends were saying, "Oh, your dad's crazy," because of the show that Discovery and MUFON created, and it was just it was a mess. And so,
well, and that's the transition that you're talking about. I think is a real one, because there was certainly a period, and if you go back to the early 1990s, well, and before, but throughout when things started to take off for the UFO community, people wanted to know what was it like inside of the flying saucer. What was it like with it? What were the controls like? They wanted to know this nuts and bolts aspect of it. And they wanted these descriptions that I think many couldn't actually give. But that was the view of ufology back then. Today, we're starting to understand physics and interdimensionality and parallel worlds and these type of constructs where the ET question, well, it may be nuts and bolts and metallic flying saucers, but there may be something else involved here. And we're starting to understand that today. So your case has resurfaced because you've been talking about this for so long. Do you feel a little bit vindicated in this?
I absolutely do. And I have been for a long time, not in the public, but at least with my parents and my kids' friends, because some of these three-letter people that I became very good friends with actually came to our house early on, and one of them specifically met with my parents and told them, "You have no idea," because they thought I was crazy. And actually, a friend of ours, I can't say his name, but everybody would know him. He came. Well, I'll just tell you, Jim came several years ago and asked my kids to invite their friends over, anybody that didn't believe in their father. And he set them down and said, "You need to believe." I mean, he's not telling a story. And so that alone helped us more than anything as a family, and it drew us together. We felt isolated from all the attacks, but we felt vindicated as a family because they were experiencing it and still are, just like I was that night. It never left. It's still here.
Now, I want to talk, and we'll do this much, much later, but you bring up your kids and your family. And we're going to go back to 2007 in 2 minutes. But I just want to say this. I watched a couple of times the series of videos that your son made. Your son made these videos in the backyard of a burning tree. Now, we'll discuss this later. I don't want to do this now. But now, with this happening on your property, in your backyard, and your son is videotaping, now your son is a part of this, whether you want him to be or not. How did he mentally deal with this? Because that was an extraordinary experience to have happen right there in front of everybody. I think your wife was even there, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah, everybody was there, and that's just one experience out of it's ongoing. It never quit, and so that was more like Marvel to him. It blew everybody away. Even my mother and father lived next door, and that was a turning point. And they knew there was a reason, and I'll get into it later, why that thing happened. It was actually me asking these entities, these celestial beings, a question. I need a sign. I need a sign for this specific reason. If you want me to do this, I need to see it. And that's what happened. And I mean, and it just happened that way. It was in response to a question.
And your son is okay. I mean, I can imagine he must be the most popular kid in school when that kind of stuff goes down. But the family's dealing with all of this okay?
Yeah, it wasn't always easy because, when Dad comes home from the river in 2007 telling the story, they didn't get home. They were off, my wife with three of our children with her mother for a few days, and it was just Christopher and I, Chris Jr. And once they got home and the whole family heard the story, my children were very small. My daughter was like 10 years old, and then three boys were just a little older than her. Chris Jr. was the oldest at 17. And so they were terrified. I mean, absolutely scared of what was going on, the unknown, not knowing what it was. And then it started right away at our house. It never left. I was so obsessed, Jimmy, that I wanted them to believe me, that I actually started praying that my family would experience this with me so they wouldn't not believe me, because everybody, church members, family members, cousins, aunts, and our family's been here since the 1700s, so there's probably 400 or 500 family members in this town. And I was the talk of the town, being made fun of, and my children were experiencing this stuff. I'd get them up in the middle of the night, 5 o'clock in the morning. My wife would be so mad because there's this 40-foot blue orb hovering in the backyard, or this, bigger than that, white orb hovering over a tree in our backyard or right over top of our house. And there was many nights back in 2007, 2008 that they just had no clue and were terrified about what it was we were dealing with. And of course, I was battling that too. The question, I've always maintained it was spiritual. There's some sort of angelic entity, because I was sick, and that went away right after. I mean, immediately they took that from me. But yet the community was saying, "Oh, you're playing with Satan himself."
Of course.
Yeah, right. And this is a very big area for Christianity. And then I was a deacon in the Pentecostal church at one time. So imagine me coming back telling that these big balls of fire came out of the sky, took me away for 4 hours, and took my Crohn's away. And that didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. So.
Yeah, Rita asked me 2 nights ago, Chris, you're going to laugh, and it's okay. You can laugh out loud. Rita goes, "So, Jimmy, what's North Carolina like?" And you know how I answered her? I said, "Everybody goes to church. Everybody." Right? And she goes, "Oh, okay, all right, but that's the best way that I can kind of, for somebody that's never been there and doesn't know what the community is like, when they say the Bible Belt, there's a reason they describe it that way. And that's it. And for you to say these words, and I know Rita's in her studio down the hall listening, you just reaffirm that. And for the audience, you need to understand North, South Carolina, and that entire section of the country, up and down the coast, and then going west, into Tennessee and Arkansas and Missouri and Mississippi and Georgia, Alabama. This is the way of life. This isn't something that you read about in books. This is what happens in Fayetteville, isn't it?
Absolutely. I can pull out of my driveway and go a mile either direction. Just say I'm in the center, and a mile each way. There's probably a dozen churches.
No, that's right. That's right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Okay, let's go. Before we hit the break, let's set up what's going on here. Let's go back to January 8th, 2007. When you woke up that day, was it just like any other day?
No, that's it's important to know where I was at that point. By 07, and let's back up a bit. In 04, I was just at the peak of being extremely sick with this disease, and my wife and I were we were steadily building, houses by the tune. We had 40 under construction at that time. And Desert Storm was going on, and when all that happens in a military town, it shuts, the sales just shut down. It was hard to give a house away, and I had 28 houses for sale in 01 when they first went to, or in that area, there was they were shipped overseas. But so long story short, my business was failing, and to top it off, I was so sick I wasn't able to tend to my company like I should have been, and $15, $18 million a year, and it was just run by my wife and I. It was basically dumped in her lap, and she was extremely worried about my health, and I'm in bed mostly for 2 years there. So everything was going away. My life's savings, my career, and I was suffering. I was near a nervous breakdown. I couldn't eat without being in the restroom 20 times a day. I mean, that's how bad it got. So I actually ended up having a near-death experience, and just before we sold the business, she actually sold it while I was in my bed. The lawyers came to have the papers signed, and we got taken advantage of there. So everything's going downhill. That's where I'm at, right? That's in 2004 and 5. So my father had a heart attack, and we had to sell our home, a big, beautiful home, and move out. We moved into actually a mobile home that we remodeled into a house for our whole family, and we relocated next to him. And he was so worried about me because of I was depressed. I didn't want to work. I couldn't. I just felt so bad, sick. And so I was at the end of my rope, you might say. I was not, I was sick and I was unhappy. I loved my children and wife more than anything. And so that day, it was around October or September of 2006, Dad talked me into traveling to the coast, a couple hours away, and building a house for a friend. And so he talked me into it, and I hired a crew of guys, of 10 guys, and we went down, and for 4 months they worked on this big beach house, and here it is just after Christmas, first week of January, they finished the house up, and I had gone down and did an inspection and told them when they got this done, just come on home and make sure they got their money. And it was a Tuesday, January 8th of 2007. They called me on the way home. They finished their punch list and said, we'd like to celebrate. And I had the only four-wheel drive truck between us all, and you needed that to get down to where we were going, which is a little cul-de-sac on a dead-end road that dead ends to the river. And so I agreed. They got to my house around lunch, picked their checks up, and they talked Chris Jr. and I to going because my wife was out of town. And about 2 o'clock, they came. They called and said they had cashed their checks and had their poles and equipment ready. So I picked them up. They're about five to 10 minutes away, and the river was only 5 to 8 minutes from my home. And so about 2:30, we were parking on the bank of the Cape Fear River, and it was a cool day, sunny, real blue sky, and I was scheduled to be very cold that night, like freezing 30, 32 degrees. And I wasn't into fishing a whole lot. I didn't let them know, especially my children, my mental state, how bad I felt, where I was thinking. I'm just crying out to whoever in heaven or whoever's up there, I need help. I'm just there. That's where I was. And it's important to know that because I have literally hundreds and hundreds of people that write me, and for that many years to tell me their experience, and nearly all of them having their experiences start off when they're at the bottom of, lost a mother or a child or husband, and especially death. A lot of people come, to tell their story because they've experienced trauma, PTSD of some sort. Mm-hmm. So 2:30, we're there. They put they went out and they gathered these forked sticks and stuck them in the ground and had their cooler, and I left them sitting with their back to the river. They were facing the river. I walked away and told them I was going down in the forest, which is in the end of the cul-de-sac. Just imagine going down across the field, and I have to say this so we can get a mental picture. It would turn off a paved road and cross this field about 200 yards across a dirt road, a road in the middle of the field, 2-road road. And when you get to the tree line, there's a gate. And when you open that gate and drive down, you go 1/8 of a mile due east downhill to the river. You have to turn and parallel the river to the right or the south, and then another 1/8 mile it dead ends into a cul-de-sac. So we got set up in there, and I left them, and I walked further down into the forest.
Okay, let's stop. Let's stop right there. I need to take a break. It's a perfect spot to do this. So let's get our break in. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe, and we are we're going to finish when we come back, but pick up where we're leaving off. We're at the river. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I want to remind everybody our next two events coming up. Contact in the Desert, May 29th through June 1st in Palm Springs, California. ContactInTheDesert.com. And June 26th and 27th, 2020, will be over in Manchester, United Kingdom for the Awakening Conference. You can go to awakeningufo.com. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. And right before the break, Chris was setting us up for the events of January 2007. And he's down on the bank of the Cape Fear River with three of his subcontractors. His son, Chris, is there. And Chris separated from the group. Everybody's got their fishing poles, and that's what's going on down on the river. And you walked away, Chris. What happened next?
Well, it's now about 3:30 or 3:15. I just told the guys I wasn't into fishing. I wanted to go down in the forest and sit on the riverbank and see wildlife. Basically, it was just an excuse to get away and try to meditate and call on the universe to help me in this situation. You know, just felt bad and was in a bad way. But so now it's 3:30. I walk away. I walk about, I don't know, a quarter mile at most down south, back in the back of the cul-de-sac, which is important because that's where Chris Jr. went to search for me later. And I sat down by a big old oak tree and a river gully where the creeks spill into the river, and had this nice place and never did see a thing, but sat there until about 4:15, 4:30, I guess, and it's probably 4:30, and it's getting dark. It's January, so the sun sets just about 5:30. So it's dark in the forest. It's starting to get dark, and I thought maybe I'd better come out and check on the guys. I didn't have a flashlight. So I walked back up to them. They were having a ball. Everything was rosy. They were still sitting there fishing side by side. And my question was, do you want to go home or do you want to light a fire because it's going to get cold tonight? And they were all like, we're having fun. Let's stay a while. We haven't been here that long. So I said, okay, let's everybody stop what we're doing and let's go gather wood. And so all five of us jumped up and went around that 1 acre of cul-de-sac of picnic area and picked up a whole lot of broken limbs and deadfall, and got them a fire going, and it's now about, I would say, 10 after 5. And they were back fishing, and I felt like, well, I've got them situated, because usually that's my mentality. I felt like I'm working still, organizing people. So I felt that they were doing fine, and I told them, I'm going to walk back up to the field where we came in, which is a quarter mile away. You have to go parallel with the river 1/8 of a mile north, and then when you get to that end, it turns dead left west up the hill. You got to go way up the hill. So I convinced them that I was going to go up and sit and see if any deer or turkey come out and to feed in the field late, before sunset. And so I left them and I started walking, and I left the cul-de-sac, the open area, and started down this narrow path where we drove in, and it was real narrow at that time. And actually the mirrors on my truck would bump the bushes on either side of the road in places. It was that narrow going in, and it was real rutty, foot-deep ruts with mud. And so I'm walking up through there trying to keep from stepping in ankle-deep mud. And it's starting to get kind of dark down this area. It's like trees just grow over this, like a tunnel down through there. So it was a bit dark. Didn't have a flashlight. And, of course, I grew up hunting, killed a deer, my first deer at 5 years old. And I grew up doing that. I was raised with a father that hunted all his life. And that ended for me for ever. After this experience, I never hunted again. I just had to throw that in there. So I wasn't scared, right? But something on that first eighth of a mile leg, I heard right away start walking to my left in the thick bushes, and I couldn't see it. And I thought, well, maybe it's a deer, or maybe it's a turkey heard me, because I'm used to that, being real quiet. Well, it started to freak me out because I stopped, and when I stopped, it stopped. And I thought, that's not normal. So I walked another 40 yards, and it would start walking again. And then I stopped, and it stopped. So after a couple times of that, I got down and really looking under the bushes, trying to see back in there to what it might be.
Right.
And that happened 3 times on my way out to that first eighth of a mile. And when I got to the end and started up the hill, the light was coming down that road enough that I felt more comfortable. I wasn't fearful like I was at that time, and that was a pretty nervous time for me. And I don't ever get much that kind of nervous in the woods.
Well, you're in dark woods and you got footsteps going on. Yeah, that's going to freak anybody out, Chris. Come on, man. That's okay. Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. All right. So what happens?
So I'm walking along after I lose that thought of what might be tracking me there. Couldn't figure it out because it sounded like 2 feet. I'd ruled out turkey, deer. I get to the end and I feel a sense of relief because I'm looking up the hill and light is kind of illuminating that last eighth of a mile uphill. You could see the gate way up ahead, and the sound quit. So my mind went back to asking whoever's up there, I need help. I mean, I don't know what to do. I'm 46 years old, and I'm having to start over. What do I do? Help me. And that's where I was. So as I made my way up, I'm watching every footstep because it's muddy. I'd take a couple steps and I'd look ahead and I'd look back down at my feet to keep them from stepping in the ruts. And as I got closer to the gate, which is 100 feet in elevation roughly from the bottom up, it was about 5:15, 5:20 now. And so the sun is probably already set. I'm thinking that it's probably already set behind the trees. Perfect time to get up here. And when I got about 20 feet from that gate, I began to see the tree line on the far side of the field. And the first time I glanced up, the sun looked mighty big and brilliant orange, like when it's setting late in the evening on the ocean or anywhere, and you can look at it and it doesn't hurt your eyes on a clear day. It's just brilliant orange and soft to the eyes. So that's what it looked like to start with, but looked mighty big. And I didn't think about it the first time. I just looked back down, took a couple more steps. And when I got a little bit higher up, my field of vision widened. I couldn't see but just down this tunnel. And when I got closer to the top, I could see wider. Well, now there's another sun sitting there, 2 of them. And it didn't take me but a second to rule out every known thing to humanity, because I am a commercial rated pilot, and that was the love of my life. And I chose building because of children instead of flying career, because we had 4 children, and I wanted to raise my kids with my wife. We were very tight with our family. But I knew it wasn't from this world, so I immediately squatted down and used the hill to hide myself. I mean, I could duck down and they couldn't see me. I thought they could. So I sat there a few minutes and I was like, oh my God, what is this? I got the chills, my hair was standing up, and I started getting fearful. And I thought maybe I should run. So I raised up and I looked, and they're still there, these big giant orange balls of liquid fire. It looked like it was rotating kind of clockwise around it, and there were little flames shooting off, little tips of fire it appeared to be shooting off these 2 things. And they were just the other side of the field. out at the highway, and the field's about 200 yards across.
How big were they? How big were they?
I reported them 40, 50 feet, 45 feet.
Gotcha.
Round, like a 2-story house, round, big.
Right.
And so I'm terrified now. I've ruled out everything, and I'm just making my plan of escape. I'm going back down this road. I've got to watch every step. I want to run, but I'm scared to run. I'll slip in the mud. And I'm thinking all this. And so when I finally made that decision to go, I turned my body down, facing downhill. I raised up to see if they were still there. And the minute I did, another one of those things appeared above me, kind of at a distance, but clearly above me. And it shot down within 1 second to the left of these other two. And I knew right then, it knew what I was thinking. It knew I was going to run. And boy, did it ever, realization of something's about to happen. Just immediately, I found myself walking back to the fire. Actually, when I got close enough to them, I started a little jog back to the fire. And remember, I went down there. It was 10 after 5 when I left the fire. I got there probably 20 after 5. It don't take that long to get there, maybe 5:25. And so when I walked back to the fire to check on these guys to tell them, boy, you won't believe what I just saw. And that was my first thing I said. You will not believe. I was excited to tell them I saw these balls of fire. And these 3 guys, Chris Jr. wasn't there. But these 3 guys weren't fishing anymore. The fire had burned down. It was just a small fire. And they looked at me. Their eyes were great big. And they said, where in the world have you been? I said, excuse me, I was just up at the road. You won't believe what I just saw. I was excited. They were like, there's no friggin' way. We have been looking for you all night. I said, you got to be kidding me. It can't be. I didn't believe it. And then at that time, realization struck when I said, where's Chris Jr.? And they said, well, he went back in the woods where you went earlier that day looking for you. As one guy stayed at the fire and 2 got in a truck, and they drove everywhere. And so it's now about 10 o'clock.
Whoa. Okay, let's stop there for a second. Now I got some questions. Okay, let's just stop right there. To set up what is going down here, obviously now there's missing time. But you, in describing all of this, it sounds to me like you could have yelled from the field and they would have heard you, right?
Absolutely.
Right? You guys were that close in proximity. They've been out searching for you. You think only a few minutes have passed. You're coming to them excited to talk about the 2 or 3 balls of light that are over your shoulder, and you're assuming that they're probably even still in the field. You're coming down to tell them about all of this, but the exact opposite is going down. They're freaked out because you've been missing for 5 hours. Your son's out searching for you. They've been panicking because they can't find you, and you just walk up on them like, hey, man, what's up? You got to come check this out. That's what was going down, right?
That's exactly what was going on, and what had them all really, they were so quiet when I walked up, and their eyes were big as saucers, and I asked, I didn't even really have just a minute's conversation as I'm walking up, and I paused just long enough to find out where's Chris Jr. And they said, well, we lost him 2 hours ago. He went that way looking for you. And I thought, oh my God, I just freaked out. I could see my child, young boy, 17 years old, down in these woods, and it's really rugged gullies, and it's a big head of woods, and I'm thinking he's lost in there. I mean, now we got problems. So I just took off away from them, and I ran to the back of that cul-de-sac, which is an acre in a round circle, about an acre, or maybe not quite round. But
is it paved? By the way, is it paved?
Oh, it's grass.
Yeah,
you just dead end into the woods, and there's a little grassy area that It was not mowed, but it's where people would camp out and have picnics and fish on the river.
But it's also 10 o'clock at night, so it's dark.
Yeah, it's dark, and I couldn't even believe that I had any missing time. You couldn't make me believe it.
Right, and before you went off looking for Chris Jr., did you tell your three workers about the balls of light?
Yeah, and when I did, that's when their eyes were just like really, they were freaked out, because what had gone on was, the best I can explain it, is while I was gone and they were out looking for me, Chris Jr. was panicked. He was looking for his dad, and he would walk. He left. He was the first one to get alarmed looking for me, why I hadn't come back, and so it took them a while to get started on their process of looking for me, because Junior, he's been doing it. He'd walk towards the back of the cul-de-sac and he'd call his father, and he'd come back, "Where's my dad? I mean, he's been gone too long." And finally, he came walking up and telling them that he saw these two red orbs. That, remember the place I'd walked out of there and I was nervous? I kept hearing something in the forest tracking me. Well, he's looking down that road, and he sees two red orbs. He said they looked like the size of a basketball, came out of the forest on one side, the side that I heard the sound, and crossed the road and came towards where they were fishing. So he started coming up telling them there was these two balls of light went in the woods, and they were like, "Don't mess with us, Chris Jr." And he's like, I'm telling you. So they finally go on the manhunt. Junior goes back to where he was at the back of the cul-de-sac, and during that time, he looks way down that path, and he sees these two orbs come back out of the riverside of the road, comes back out in the middle of the road, and now they're 100 yards from him or close to it, and here they come towards him. And they're about waist high off the ground, two red balls of light. So he sees them coming closer and closer, and as they got closer, he gets scared, and he kind of backs himself up under these thick shrubs that surround this area. I mean, it's just real thick brush right around the area, cul-de-sac. And so he ends up backing himself up under there to hide, and they came right up to him within 15, 20 feet of him, and he could clearly see there were these two entities, and he describes them as 3 to 4 feet tall, red glowing eyes, and they were staring at him. I mean, eye-to-eye contact, one all the time, and the other was playing with stuff on the ground. He said they would pick up a stick or a bottle or a can and shake it, and for 2 hours or close to it, the best we can tell, he was pinned down, having these entities never bothered him. They were just always there. He couldn't scream, he couldn't move, but I'm going to get my head of myself. I found him after about 5 minutes of me shouting for him, and I start back into the woods. I get right up on him, and he comes up from under these thick bushes, and he's panicked. He's like, "Dad, why did you leave me?" And he's in shock. And I'm saying, "I didn't leave you, son. I was just up at the field." He said, "No, you've been gone all night." And I could not still believe was gone all night. I said, "No, son, I have only been gone just a few minutes." He said, "No, Daddy, why'd you leave me? You've been gone all night. These creatures, they had me pinned down." And he's describing this stuff, so I'm freaking out now. I said, "Well, I saw these lights up at the hill." And so I grab him by the arm and I walk him over to the fire. And these guys are now not fishing anymore. They're just standing up looking at the fire. And they're hearing him as he's describing all this, what he had experienced. And, of course, I'd told him on my way up to the fire, what I'd seen. So now it's totally, everybody's kind of freaked out. And all of a sudden, one of the guys points up to the sky and says, "Look at that." And when we all raised our heads straight up, and it's a clear night, what it looked like, Jimmy, was the constellation, any one of them, with a bunch of stars. 8 or 9 stars just began to move about the sky, and they would go away from one another, and they would come back together. And this was going on for a minute or two, and all of a sudden 3 of these things come straight down at a very fast speed, slows to like it just was on a cushion, and lands 3 of them on the other side of the river directly in front of us. Now, the river's not that wide. It may be 60 yards wide at most, I would think. And at that moment, pandemonium set in. We got these 3 things landed over there. Everybody's freaked out by hearing these stories of, Christopher and me being missing. And so immediately we just ran to the truck, left everything sitting on the ground, left the fire burning. I mean, we left, jumped in the truck. And as we start out of there, they're panicked. Oh my God, you couldn't hear the words, like I just said, was flying about my truck. But the crazy thing is, I'm not scared anymore. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, but I wasn't a bit afraid, but they were terrified. Chris Jr. was terrified. And so as we left out of there, my truck's wallering in the ruts. They're saying, go faster, go faster.
Right.
One of the guys yells out that these red orbs, which we understood from Junior's description of what they were behind us, coming. One of them was, anyhow, following the truck out of there. And I floored it as hard as I could. And it was 3 grown men and my son were just, you couldn't imagine what all the fear and the words going on was just, it was total panic. And so when I got straight going west out of the worst part of the mud, and I started up that hill, I was able to go faster. And when we cleared the top of that hill, I felt like the old show Streets of San Francisco. I used to watch that, and they would jump over these hills.
You got that thing. You got 4 wheels off, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We were trying to get out of there, and as soon as we jumped over the top of that hill through the gate, I laid on the brakes as hard as I could and slid to a stop, because those 2 original red or orange balls of fire are still there in the exact same place, and that 3rd one, orange ball of fire that was up above me that appeared and came down, undoubtedly was the one that got me, because it's now no longer red. It's looking like a 40-foot football or egg-shaped thing. I've heard tic-tac many, many times, and it got a lot of people's attention. I described it 40, 45 feet, 50 feet. It's like a Greyhound bus now sitting in the road crossways between us and the highway, and it's sideways, and it's glowing white, bright white, and it has this light going around it that looked like spikes, kind of like crystal spikes, but it was the light doing this, and it was going around it, and every direction. And there's a video, I-10 UFO. It's called I-10 UFO, which is I-10 Florida, the interstate. Somebody pulls over and takes this video, and I verified that video to some folks, people that would know, these scientists, that's exactly what I saw. And it was just, we had this standoff. Now everybody's really panicked, really bad. We thought it was bad before. Now we got 3 on the river behind us. We got 2 in the air in front and 1 on the ground.
Okay, right there. Let's take a break. Perfect spot to do that. So let's go ahead and get our commercial break in. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. We're talking about January 8th, 2007. What happened at the Cape Fear River. More with Chris after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. And if you ever miss a live show, a live broadcast, just get our podcast. That's all you got to do. It's updated every night after the show. Go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the podcast banner. It's just $2 per month. You've got over just about 1,200 shows in the archives. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. And Chris, picking up where we left off, you guys hightail it. You're in your truck. You encounter one of these objects, which is now, as you describe, it's changed its shape a little bit, or it's a different object. It doesn't matter. It's now like a bus crossing the road. There's 3 objects there. The standoff is about to start. You guys were already terrified, terrorified, I might add. But things are about to really go off the rails. You guys don't know this yet. But at this point, haven't you learned that you can't outrun a UFO, Chris? that ain't going to happen. that part is never part of the play. And that's what, okay. All funnies aside. But I can't imagine what you guys are going through. What time is it now? How much time has transpired from when you guys went to go find Chris? You have left the field. You encounter them. That was around 10 p.m. or so, and the 5 hours of missing time. At this point, do you have any idea what time it is?
Well, it's not very long, because when I got to them about 10, best we could figure between us is about 10 o'clock. I ran right away to look for Chris Jr., and within 10 minutes, I'm back to where they are. I have already found him, and we're back just about to see these things come down and land in front of us. And I would say it's probably 10:15, 10:20.
Gotcha.
That we're at the top of the hill now, and our road is blocked. There's 2 dirt road that comes across that field. Well, now this third object is sitting across the road about halfway between us and the highway. And so now everybody's like, where's the Air Force? Oh, my Lord, this is it. We're going to die tonight. I want to see my children. I want to see them the last time before it's over. This was all happening in real time. And I mean, it was just pure panic. We couldn't go. And so there's a mobile home to our right and slightly in front of us, but to our right is adjoining property, and it's actually all the way back near the gate. And so one of the guys said, hey, I know who lives there. Let's go up. None of us had a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone, period.
Is this the mobile home? I want you to finish this, but is this the mobile home where the door was open and you guys went in and nobody was there?
Well, we didn't actually go in, but I drove my truck. Now, I've got this thing in front of me, so I had to go up about 30 or 40 yards towards this object and then make a right across the road, across the ditch into their driveway. I pulled right up to their front door, and there was 2 cars home. The storm door was closed, but the main door was open. So we could see the TV through the door and the lights inside. And my bumper is literally 4 foot from their deck, facing right dead in their door.
And you didn't have a cell phone, did you?
Nope.
Right.
That was part of what I couldn't afford it, and I didn't want the stress. I had so many people from warranties from houses that were still calling me that I no longer had on the business. Somebody else did, but they were still calling me. So I had to get away from all stress. So here we are with no phone. One of the guys says, let's pull up there. I know this person. Maybe we can use his phone and call for help, and hopefully they'll see this with us. And so we drive up. I stop. Donnie, a friend of one of the guys, Donnie, he's a crew leader. He jumps out and he runs up, goes up this little stoop. This little deck is only like 6 by 6. So he runs up and he knocks on the door. He looks in the window and he shouts out to his friend, and nobody came to the door. It was crazy. I mean, the TV was going, the cars were in the yard, and nobody came. So after a couple of minutes, I'm looking out my driver's side window to my left, and this thing's still hovering in the middle of the highway, the road, 100 yards away. He gets back in the truck after nobody responds, and I back out to the road, and I turn back, and I'm facing this thing again. So now we're a little closer to it. And after, I don't know how long, this 2 or 3 minutes maybe, we hear 3 gunshots. And all we could think of is somebody shooting at this thing. Because there's a couple houses up near the highway, not right there, but maybe somebody had seen it and they're firing a gun at it. That's what we thought. All of us heard it, and we reported it to the investigators. Well, after the 3rd shot, this thing kind of pivots. It's only 5 feet off the ground, hovering sideways, 40, 45 foot long, kind of egg-shaped. And it turns towards us, and here it's coming. Oh, my Lord, everybody is just completely about to lose it. But I'm not afraid. This is the crazy thing. I'm worried about these guys, and my son especially, because he was like in shock. So here this thing comes, and it's coming towards us, and it's coming closer. It's very low, and now it starts to gain altitude. And by the time it gets to my truck, there's trees behind us, like on the riverbank, and these trees are about 60 or 70 foot tall. This thing barely clears these trees. I could have, I've said it many times, taken a homemade slingshot and shot it through my sunroof, and it had hit this thing. Mm-hmm. No, it was just brilliant light. It's glowing bright white now. And it was very slow. But once it gets almost directly overhead, it kind of pivots towards the north, and it fires off like it was shot out of a cannon. Just disappeared immediately. Well, now we're heading home. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We were going quick. And these guys were actually fighting who would get to go home to their family first. And I'm really.
Oh, man. You continue. I know exactly that's exactly the mood, right? That's the fight that should be happening right now. I get to go home first. What do you mean? I'm going home first. I'm closer. That's happening. I wanted to ask you really quick, before it flew away, as it's coming over the trees, and you're describing this brightness, was the ground and everything around you illuminated too as well? Was just everything enveloped in the light?
Absolutely. And what blinding, brilliant.
And what were you hearing at that time?
Couldn't hear a thing. I didn't hear no noise from it. It was just. I guess it could have if it wasn't for all the commotion in the truck.
Sure.
I mean, everybody was just shouting to the top of their lungs. And so now this thing's gone. So I floor it. And we're heading straight at these 2 red glowing orbs, the same ones that were there at 5 o'clock or 5:30 that day, 5:15. Now they're still there, and we're heading directly at them. But they're a little ways away from the highway, just beyond the highway, and just above the trees good. So we run out, we make it to the main paved road, and I floored it, and we had about 2.5 miles to get to where 2 of these guys live. They're next door neighbors. They live side by side, 2.5 miles away. So as we're heading, they're fighting, all of them. I'm going home first. Well, they agreed to let this other guy go home first, which was 4 miles away. So we literally had to go past their house, drop him off, turn around and come back and drop these 2 guys off before Christopher and I could head home. Well, on our way to drop these guys off, there's this main power line, a great big high tension, where you got these big 3 lines, 4 lines that droop with these towers. We had to cross up under this thing. It's right in this sharp curve. As we near this curve, it's a 35-mile-an-hour curve. You have to really slow down. They call it the dead man's curve. As we're going under it, there's this big, giant, dark, couldn't see a color. It was black against the sky. And it had these like lights across the side as we were approaching the end of it, back of it. Looked like a row of windows, actually. And it was very low, just over that power line, and just to our left, maybe 200 feet. So we didn't actually go under it, but we were so close. It was not hard for anyone to see it. I mean, it was there, right over the power line. I wanted to stop. I'm still not afraid anymore. But they weren't having anything to do with that, and it was like, you can't stop, floor it. And so I actually took on off and dropped David off first, turned around and came back to drop Donnie and Jean off. And I didn't go as far as the power line. Actually, Christopher was so ready to get home. I was ready to get him home. We actually, instead of going back towards that power line where this thing's hovering, so he didn't have to go through any more of that, I turned back and went back to where we dropped the first guy off and went that way home, which is the long way. And we made it to this main 4-lane road called 87 Highway, which goes from the coast up to Raleigh. So we turned left on the 4-lane, and we got to cross back under this power line. It's just the other side of this head of woods. We're paralleling the 4-lane. So as we go under or start to get towards that power line, there are cars parked along the road, 6 or 8 cars. They're out. They can still see this big light hovering back where we just came from. It's about a mile across that head of woods or less to where this thing is still hovering. Of course, I left. I went on. I slowed down long enough to see it, and I floored it, and we go on home, Christopher and I. Now it's probably, 11 o'clock or so, I'm guessing. So we have this fairly big 5-bedroom house. Well, it was a mobile home I turned into a home, and it was 3,500 feet or close to it. So Christopher runs in the door ahead of me. He runs come in the back door. He runs to the front. He turns all the outside lights on, closes every blind, locks the door. He makes every bedroom he ran to, he would run in and close the window, turn the light on, lock the door. Even the bathrooms.
Smart.
He turned the light on and locked the door.
Smart. I'd have done the same thing.
Yeah, so I'm in my study, turning the news on, trying to find out if there's any, if there's anything on the news, because I just thought that we were being invaded. We just knew that the military, Fort Bragg, knew about it, and they were coming to fight it or to do whatever they were going to do to save us. And so I'm trying to find the news. Chris Jr. finally gets his windows all battened down and doors closed, and he comes in there where I'm at. And within a couple of minutes, then I heard something. It was a low hum that was kind of like bum, 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 bum when it went over the house. And to me, I just immediately thought Fort Bragg. That was a Chinook, or it was an Apache, and it's heading towards the river because it was going directly that way, and it was very low when it came over. That's what I thought. Well, within 2 or 3 minutes, it wasn't long. My dad lived next door. We had 6 acres out in the rural part of the county. I was born and raised there. It was a dirt road. They didn't pave it till I was 16, so that tells you it was kind of 15 miles from south of Fayetteville. Mm-hmm. So we have, large lots, 6 acres between us, Dad and I, side by side. And behind the house, he's got all these hound dogs that he's raised since before I was born. He had 104 was the most he had. So really large kennel, enclosed, roof over it, lights, very nice. But every dog in that pen, there were 15 at least, hound dogs, and they have a very loud voice. They were making this noise that it really stood my hair up on end, because they were seeing something that they sounded like they didn't know what it was. They were cautious, afraid. My dad would call it a boo bark. That's what he would say. They're afraid of something.
Right.
So these 15 dogs are just, you could hear them a half a mile away. They're that loud. And I jumped up and I ran to the back door, because immediately I thought, somebody's breaking into Dad's shop. We shared this 30 by 40 building together where we worked on boats and cars and motorcycles, and all my tools that Dad and I stuck together out there. And all I could think is near the dog kennel, somebody's out there around it about to break in, and these dogs are seeing it. That was what I thought. I wasn't thinking no more UFO. So Chris Jenner's like, no, Daddy, please don't go out there. Please don't. I said, son, we're going out there. I've got to see who's breaking in Dad's shop. Rosie's at the back door. I'm looking through the glass, and she's a 100-pound Chesapeake Bay Retriever, hair all standing up, and she's barking, looking in the direction of the dog kennel, which is close to 100 yards away, down in the woods behind our house. So I managed to talk Christopher in. We'll be very quiet. We'll use Rosie in front of us to protect us, and she wouldn't let nobody bother us. I knew that, and so I said, we just not use a flashlight. We'll ease back down the path to where the dogs are, and kind of stay out of sight and see if we see somebody. Rosie will chase them. So he grabs me by the back of the shirt and out the door. When I opened that door, Rosie looked up at me and took off, and she ran out about 20 yards and stopped and looked back, and I motioned her forward, and we were coming towards her very quiet, and she takes off. She runs out of sight back to where the kennel is. So Christopher and I sneak our way back in the dark. We get up near the kennel, and I was instantly perplexed, because they're not looking out towards the road, towards the front of the kennel where the garage is. It's right in front of the garage, dog kennel. They're actually looking out the back in the forest, and this real thick stuff. You can hardly walk through. So I immediately thought, well, it can't be a person, because if they were worried about being seen, they'd have hit the road and been gone. They wouldn't be back behind the dog kennel.
Where'd Rosie go?
Well, she's frozen right.
Okay.
Kennel. I mean, 3 feet from me. She's pointing, and her hair's standing up, and she's barking into thick woods. And all these 15 hounds are doing the same. They're barking at this my hair is standing up by now, because it was just real creepy the way they didn't know what they were seeing. That's all I could think. Maybe it's a bear, because there'd been bear spotted just down the street from us recently at that time. So I whispered to Christopher, I said, Junior, I'm going to send Rosie in on whatever's in there, and let's run back out to our side of the lot. Our lot goes grass all the way to the rear of the property. And this head of woods is behind Dad's house. So I immediately thought we could run back out towards the yard, take a left, and go down about 100 yards to the back of the property and stop and hide and see whatever she runs out of there. And I'm thinking bear now, right?
Right.
So I take off. We made an agreement. He's got me by the back of the shirt. We took off running hard as we could, and we run all the way back to the back. Actually, when I made a left-hand turn, Christopher pulled out away from me, and I just knew he was coming behind me. So I run and I run. I didn't look back. I just knew he was behind me, and I ran to the back and run up to this big oak tree. You can't reach around it. I mean, it's huge. And I run to it in a full run and stop myself against it. And I'm trying to catch my breath. And I look back behind him, back behind me, to see if he's coming. And I just thought he was about to get to me. And when I looked behind me, Jimmy, I just thought it was it. I thought it was the end of my life at that moment, because behind me, about, 4 to 6 foot away, I could have leaned forward and touched it, was this, looks like about a 4 foot tall, size of a 4-year-old child. It was standing there staring me dead in the face, and my hands are against a tree. I'm looking behind me, right over my shoulder, and I'm like, oh my God, this is it. I turned, I made myself closer to the tree and turned myself, trying not to get closer to it. And I got my back against the tree, and I looked straight at it, and I said, I surrender. I mean you no harm. And at that time, here's Rosie. She's getting closer. She's coming through this forest. This thing says very loud, I heard it like a voice, and it's standing there. Is no expression. Is glowing like the color of the moon. Its chest, there's a triangle, a dark-looking triangle in its chest. It's glowing so bright I couldn't see nothing but the triangle there, and which is very important, by the way. And I'll get into that later, but it just says in this loud voice in my head, it says, you don't understand. We're not here to harm you. We're here to help you. So here comes Rosie. All at the same time this is happening. It's less than a minute, I see this thing, and within a minute it's all taking place. Rosie's starting to come out of the forest, almost to burst out of the woods, and this thing disappears right in front of me. She comes by me, still barking, and runs right on out of hearing. At least a quarter mile, I heard her barking as she went on down, away from me into these thick forests to the north of us. And so I'm shaken to the core now, because now this thing has become a reality. I've seen what Junior is describing. It's got this glassy-looking appearance. I mean, it looked like it was polished, the outside of its body, gleaming, and it was wearing, I would guess, this one-piece suit with a triangle, but it's glowing, and it looks kind of glassy looking on its limbs. I could see the triangle and its eyes actually reflecting on its limbs because it was so bright. Fiery red eyes. And so I take off in a slow walk back to the house, and I'm trying to think, I can't tell Christopher what I just saw. What he did is he ran to the house. When I made a left, he made a right. He ran to the house and was standing at the back door looking through the back door. And as I approached it, I'm thinking, man, I have got to have a cigarette. And I was a smoker then. I had been about 8 or 10 years at that time, but I quit just after that.
No, it's okay. It's cigarette time for sure.
Yeah, it's cigarette time, right? So I opened the door, and I'm not telling Junior what just happened. I didn't want to tell him. So I go in my study, and I'm thinking, I've got to smoke, and he's not going to be happy if I go outside. So I walk up to my couch, and at the back of the couch is a window behind the couch. So I put my knees up on the couch, and I'm trying to raise the blind. And Christopher's saying, "What are you doing? Don't do that, Daddy. What are you doing?" And I said, "Son, I got to smoke. I just got to have a cigarette." So I raised that blind, and when I did, about 20 feet from my house, the floodlights were shining very bright. There's this thing coming towards the window, and I saw it fairly plain. And it's about 8 foot tall. Now, I've seen this little one just now. Same thing Chris Jr.'s described, but now here's this very tall-looking thing, big head, big eyes coming towards me, and it scared me extremely. I mean, that one made the chills come over me to I felt like I just stuck my finger in a light socket. And all I thought was, okay, protection time. So I ran, I grabbed him. I didn't tell him what I'd just seen. I just slammed the window down. I grabbed him by the arm, and out the front door we went. We got in my truck. I'd actually parked it on the side of the house. We went out the front door. I wasn't going out where it was. I ran around, and we jumped in the truck, and we took off from there. And he's like, where are we going? I said, away from here, son.
Okay.
So we ended up.
Okay, let's stop right there. Got to take a break, Chris. I'm on the edge of my seat, and I know everybody else is, but I got to take a break. So let's get this in. Whew. Man. Chris. Okay. All right, this is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. When we come back, we'll talk about the escape from the house. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. Tomorrow night, Richard Dolan. Thursday night, Jason Quitspiracy Part 2. Tonight, it's Chris Bledsoe. And, Chris, I've done a lot of interviews and a lot of experience with this. And this, it's extraordinary. It's taking things to another level. But that part of it, and the fact that you've got coworkers involved, your son is involved, your dogs are involved, right? This is an emotional experience for you, and I can't imagine coming out of this on the other side the same person. And obviously you weren't. But wow, extraordinary. Now, I wanted to, I brought up your 3 coworkers for a reason before we move on with the escape, and I want to get to the triangle in the chest too as well. Is your coworkers, Gene and the boys, are they with you? Are they going to speak about this?
Well, they did originally, in the Discovery show, and they ran into the same problem because we're all neighbors, right? They live a couple, 3-4 miles away,
right?
And our kids went to the same schools, and when it all went down, the ridicule came so bad in our community, and it was due to the video, the show we did. It made me look like I was a liar, and them, like they were kooks, and all of us. So they decided to never discuss it again. And if I see them occasionally, we do, but publicly, they don't want to go public ever again because it was tough. It was tough. I tried that. I tried to not go public after I went the first time, but it never stopped coming, and it's still coming. Saw it tonight. So they don't talk about it a whole lot.
Okay. Yeah. I can understand why. I totally can. Back to the escape. What happens next?
So we run out the front door, we go around the side, grab my truck, and Junior's like, "What's wrong, Dad? What's wrong?" I said, "There's something in the yard, son. It's just, we're not staying here." So we go out, and we actually go to my father's house. I drove up to his, right where his bedroom window is, and it's probably midnight or it's close to it by now, and I knock on Dad's window, and he said, "What's wrong, son?" I said, "There's something in our yard. I don't know what it is, but I'm not staying here. You need to be careful." And he thought I was drinking. He said, "Are you on drugs?" I said, "Absolutely not, Dad. Are you drinking?" I said, "No, Dad." And I wasn't getting support there. He's coming out of a sleep, and he just couldn't grasp what I'm trying to tell him and the fear that Junior and I were experiencing. So I went back, jumped in the truck, left him in wonder, and we drove about 7-8 miles away to a local hayfield where there's a ballpark and community area and out in our community, and drove right out in the very center of that field where I could see in every direction and let the truck running, and that's where we spent the night until it got daylight the next morning. And that was the end of the whole, that night. Literally, it was terrifying. I wasn't scared to begin with. I was to begin with, and then remember I kept saying after I came back to the fire, I wasn't afraid. But when I raised that window and saw this big entity coming towards me, It brought back, I mean, words can't describe the electricity that I felt that caused me to grab my son and flee, thinking I'm protecting us both. And so we get home the next morning, and every day of my life I had to take all these regimens of medication. And if I went a day without it, I couldn't function. I would go backwards a week, maybe two. It just was so crucial. I had this medicine every day. Well, it's now 10 or 11 o'clock. We're home, and I'm thinking, boy, I forgot my medication. I forgot my meds, but I don't feel sick. I had no symptoms that morning.
Let me jump in, Chris, if you don't mind. The medication is not for pain. It's not narcotics. It's I just want everybody to understand we're talking about. Is it okay if I don't want to talk about your symptoms, but you're taking steroids for arthritis. You weren't taking. Right, we're not talking about drugs. We're talking about steroids, right?
Well, that's now. I take that because I have rheumatoid. That came just a few years ago. But at that time, I was taking steroids and this stuff called Robenal, Remcade, different medications they treat IBS and Crohn's for.
Right.
Stomach intestinal medication.
Right. And so that right there is worth a panic right there, because you need your meds. And okay, so continuing, and before I'm looking at the clock, we're going to be at the bottom of the hour. I can already tell we're going to hang this over into overtime, so I'm going to ask you now to prepare for that. There's just no way we're going to end this show in 20 minutes. So, okay, so now you guys return home. It's 10 a.m. You forgot your meds.
Right. So I start thinking or start looking for them, and as I'm looking for them to go get them and take them, I'm assessing my symptoms, which is usually severe nausea and severe diarrhea. That comes with Crohn's disease. And without this medication, I would start feeling like I'm going to throw up. And that was the first symptom. Well, I didn't have that. And within 2 to 3 days, every symptom was gone, and I never took any more medication for that. And after 17 and a half years of suffering with it and being treated for it, it was never there again. It's gone, disappeared. And so my wife comes home a 3 days later. I tell her about everything, and she's terrified. She don't know what to think. Everybody around thinks I'm nuts. I'm seeing Satan. Some of the churches are actually, they would wait till I left. And there was a church or two that would come out and sprinkle holy water in my property. My dad thought I was drinking, or he didn't believe it. Nobody wants to believe in this kind of stuff, but I thought everybody would want to believe. And so that sent me into almost 10 months in my room, not telling it publicly because my wife thought I was scaring my children to death. Now everybody in the community knows about it, and they're all talking about it, and I'm feeling more ostracized and more depression. I'm in this one room, not going to tell it because she didn't want me to. Was hoping it would go away. But I had this worst headache. I tried to remember that missing time. And every time I would think about it, it would actually make me pass out. My wife would tell you that. If somebody questioned me about it, I'd try to think about it. I would just pass out, stress from it. And my head would hurt so bad. And so 10 months into it, we had no TV, so we just had internet. So I'm on the internet surfing everything I can find about UFOs, and this UFO Files comes on. First time I'd seen it, and it's Stanton Freeman. And he's talking about this stuff, and I thought, oh my Lord, this is a pretty credible guy. He's talking about it. It kind of gave me the strength to start thinking, I'm going to tell this to somebody. I need to talk to this guy. That's all I could think. And so they advertised MUFON on their website. And so I went online and they said, report your sighting here. So I filled out the form, and I didn't hit send for 2 weeks because I just knew if I did this, I would be in trouble with my family. My wife didn't want me talking about it because the kids were absolutely terrified. My daughter, she's 10 years old, and they were just hoping it would go away. So for 2 weeks, long about the 15th of October, which was my birthday, I hit send. Well, within a day, I get a call from someone in California, Jim DiMacci.
When's your birthday?
October 15th, 61.
Okay. I thought you said something. My birthday is October 10th.
Wow.
And I thought you said October 10th. I was like, what?
No.
That would have been too much. Okay. So Los Angeles reaches out.
Yeah, right. And says, we'd like to come visit you. There's a local guy in your area that is a local investigator. Can we send him out? And I said, sure. And so another day goes by, and this gentleman by the name of Steve McDaniels, he's from Raleigh, about an hour away. He calls and says, I want to come do an investigation. So I got cold feet again. I thought, no, I can't do this. I may be divorced. Just agonizing over, should I tell it? So I put him on hold, and here comes Christmas. Right after Christmas, he writes me, and he says, well, I guess since you're not going to talk with us, we're going to close your case. And I said, no, you can't. I've got to talk to somebody. It's going to drive me up the wall. I can't remember what happened for all that time. So he comes right about the anniversary, somewhere around the first week of January, and he does the interview, and he mails it off to headquarters. Well, I get a call from the headquarters, and this guy by the name of James Carrion. And he's like, that case is too important for Steve to handle. I want to assign new people to your case. So here comes this guy with a Homeland Security background, and he just moves in, and all of a sudden he's appointed to the state director over North Carolina, and boom, he's at my house. He's got my case now. And it happened that quick. And when he comes, here comes James Carrion, here comes Richard, here comes all these people. Norm Gagnon from Maryland. So they're all there now, somewhere around the second month or so of 08. And by June, they never quit coming for week after week. Somebody was there, 1, 2, 3 guys, usually just one, after the main investigation. It was Richard, and he spent 6 months there, and they just interrogated me like I was on trial for murder or something. And I would just tell them, if you ask me these same questions again, I'm never going to talk to you again. I need to know what's going on with me. Well, once we finish the investigation, we'll tell you what we know. And I kept begging for answers. Well, they never gave them. They insisted we do a UFO story and tell the world. And so I agreed to it with Discovery Channel, UFOs Over Earth, thinking I'm going to be vindicated from this past year of misery, sleeping in this room alone, nobody to talk to. I just knew the world wanted to know. Well, that was the biggest mistake ever, because they did their thing and they didn't show the evidence. I got big circles burnt in my grass in the back, and they took soil analysis, and Norm will tell you his information got stuffed away, and all they did was bring in the guy from the FBI to do a lie detector. Did 34 questions over 2 hours, over and over and over, and he said that I was being deceptive over seeing an entity, not about all the lights and stuff. But nearly ruined the family. I mean, it was awful. What happened immediately is the teachers called my kids, my daughter up front in front of the class, and they would make fun of these students would make fun of their father, and you can imagine the kids fighting for their dad's credibility.
Right.
And now they're seeing these lights, right? Over the first year, they're now experiencing it. My wife is experiencing shadow beings, and my children more than one time, many times. 2 at the time, walking through our house, just looked like ghosts walking through. And they reported that to MUFON as well. So I actually was so upset that I went dark. And what I discovered was that these beings, when they took me, I did a regression with MUFON, with a Harvard-trained psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Michael O'Connell. We just loved this guy. He was so nice to us, and we spent a lot of time together. And he made my headaches go away right immediately as soon as we did the regression. And so he passed away right after that. And now we're stuck with, we need answers. We need help. We asked them, can we find support? Can anybody come help our children? Help me. And they walked away and said, your case is closed. We don't have, we don't, they just didn't help us, left us. I tried to talk to the UFO world. They thought I was too much for them because I reported these beings as angels. They came in balls of fire, not a flying saucer. I reported them as orbs or big balls of fire. I'm not sick anymore. I don't understand. So after the regression, I knew that they wanted me to tell what I knew. And so I had this agonizing implanted thing that I had to tell this. I've got to tell it. So I'm beginning to get it from everywhere that I'm dealing with Satan. And so I started doubting myself, right? So I actually went dark for 5 years. I would never talk about it again. But during that time is early 2008, around, I would say June or July, right after MUFON left, Ryan calls me, Dad, there's a guy here from NASA. He wants to talk to you. Very big, tall guy. Ryan's a young boy then. So I said, all right, son, if he wants to see me bad enough, I'll be home in an hour. Just tell him to stick around. Well, he did. And that started about 11 and a half or 12 year relationship with somebody that we really, he passed away this past Thanksgiving, Dr. Hal Pavenmeyer. He's one of the top ranking astronomers in the world. He mapped the moon. I learned a lot of secrets about that, stuff he'd shared. And he has stuff on the moon sitting up there because he's also a rocket scientist. My children loved him. He came religiously. He loved my daughter. He went to her recitals. He'd come all the way from Florida just to go to her graduations and birthday parties. So I would say that it was just an honor to know this man. And he helped this family. He went to my mother and dad and told them to support me, that they only knew I was telling the truth.
Well, did that help you? Did that help you with dealing with this, knowing that here a scientist comes along from NASA to help ground you, to let you know that that this stuff could be very, very real? He doesn't know you from Adam, right, or the experience or what you saw, but that these types of experience are based in something that is real and is physical, right? And that helped you deal through all of this.
Well, yeah, and I have to give credit to the U.S. government, because There, and I can't say a whole lot there, but there are some scientists that we've gotten to know and are very fond of. People like Jim Semivan. He's in the CIA. We think the world of him. Our whole family does. He's a family friend. Him and his beautiful wife Deb. It was Jim that helped put my middle son Jeremy and my relationship back together, because he was, the kids were embarrassed, or he was a lot there at a time. He's in college, and here's even though he's seeing this stuff, it was these people that helped us the most. Not the UFO world. They didn't want to hear it. They wanted to talk about Zeta Reticulans and Pleiadians and star cruisers and people fighting reptilians on Mars. That's all I could think about. Well, that didn't jive with what happened to me, and I'm still having this to go on, right? So 5 years goes by, and I'm not telling nobody. I'm just hanging out with these scientists that come into our lives, and there's more than one. I can't say these others, but all these people are surrounded us now, and these people are having experiences with me. Dr. Pavenmeyer sat right there in a chair in the backyard, and he had his gallbladder removed and was very sick. So it was just he and I. We sat in the lounge chair, and I went in and got a big blanket and wrapped him up, and we talked about the whole cosmos. I mean, I just got to meet the most brilliant people and share a lot of experiences with them, and to this day we still do. In fact, if we had time to talk about it, I could get into a lot of different folks that have come here.
Well, we have about 4 minutes before the break. When we come back after the break, Chris, I want to talk about the tree in the backyard. That right there is a 3-hour show. But I want to save that for the last segment. When we say 3-letter agencies and their involvement, though, I do want you to comment on that. You mentioned NASA. You mentioned Semivan, which Jim is, I'm assuming, is the CIA element here. Who else from the agencies visited you? Or not, what types of agencies?
Well, just aerospace industry.
Okay.
Much. And I can't say who there. I can say that one person that I really think the world of, if you've ever heard of Dr. Diana Pasulka and her book, American Cosmic, the character in there, Tyler, I introduced him to Diana. So there's been a lot of stuff I can't share at all, but I can make, little links here. But that's her story to tell. I won't ever go there. But very prominent scientists that all are in the same idea as you and I, to find out what it is and to use anything to help the sick. That's I just can't say much there. But there's basically aerospace industry. People are very interested. All of us. It's one of the most biggest, top secret things in the world, or has been. And trust me, they want to know. Because I ask them many times. I ask, "Why are you here? Why do you want to talk to me?" Well, we want to know what it is. We want to find out. Apparently, it likes you. It don't come and talk with us. So we want to know. And so that's led me down a road of being. You hear in the UFO world saying they got 8 or 9 machines locked up at Area 51 and they fly them all over the cosmos. Well, I'm being asked, how does the electrons move?
Right.
I'm being asked, just trust me.
Right. And really quick, before the break, Chris, the first little guy, right, the 4-foot guy, and the second one that approached your window that was around 8 foot tall, were they the same just different sizes, or are we talking about two different species here?
Well, we're talking about two different entities. The little ones were either it was mechanical and or technology. They were glowing. Mm-hmm. They had the triangle on the chest, and I was very close to that. And so was Chris Jr. for a long time, more than almost 2 hours. The tall being, I saw for a short second, and then in the regression, it was those beings that appeared in my regression on board that egg-shaped craft. And here's the funny thing: when they did the television show, they put I did the regression live on television with the Discovery Channel. Well, they tried to make me look stupid because of an hour and a half in regression. The only thing they put on there was me describing these little beings that I saw in the backyard, this little being, and they said, well, who are these little beings in same question you just asked mm-hmm. in relation to the big one. Mm-hmm. I said, well, they're their children. They let them out to play. And that's what came out of the regression. And everybody got a great big laugh. But when this guy came from Florida knocking on my door, said, can we talk about those little children with the triangle on their chest? So let me tell you, there's a big thing about this triangle. And I can't say a whole lot there, but it's on the dollar bill and it's out in Egypt, and there's a lot more known about that than we would ever imagine.
And with that, Chris, I got to take a break right here, so let's do that, and we'll come straight back. I want to get into the burning tree, and we will do that after the break, and maybe I get some more information about this triangle, too, out of Chris. We'll see how that goes. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Chris Bledsoe. Chris, thank you for this conversation. Absolutely amazing. Twitter is on fire. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back with Overtime with Chris Bledsoe after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Overtime with Chris Bledsoe. Tomorrow night, Richard Dolan. Thursday night, Jason Quitt. Quitspiracy Part 2 tonight. Chris Bledsoe. And Chris, thank you. Just let me get straight to it. Thank you for sharing all of that. There is so many details that we have left out tonight. There's so much more to the story. It doesn't start and stop with what we've covered tonight. And, of course, I'm inviting you back onto the show, and we'll get you back on as soon as we can, maybe next week, and we will continue this. But I mentioned a few times tonight the burning tree. Now, the videos. Okay, I need to explain to everybody why I sound so perplexed. I don't know what I'm seeing in this video. Oh, I know what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a tree that's burning internally, but it doesn't make any sense. And this isn't something that just stopped and started and went on for a couple of minutes. This was a tremendous family experience that went on in your backyard, and it's all caught on videotape. A couple of videos that your son shot. It's not what it appears to be, though, in that it's not lighter fluid on a tree, right? That's not what we're talking about here. There's something else happening. So to simplify things, let's go back to the first day that this tree started to say, hello, I'm here.
Okay, so to put it in context, let's back up to 2012. This was, the tree caught fire. It was like October the 13th of 2012. I think that was the date, or the 12th, right in there. It's time stamped on the video, but it was early October when it happened. But at the beginning of 2012, and I can't spend much time on this, we'll maybe do that at another show. But the reason for the tree, there's a reason for it. And at Easter of 2012 is when you hear the story about this beautiful lady I talk about. I had an experience with a lady, a glowing white lady that appeared in my backyard in the middle of the night, and it told me, "You must tell your story." She did. She said, "This is your burden, you must bear." And I knew what it meant. I knew when she told me that, because for 5 years I quit talking about it. I went dark, and everybody would call me, "We want you to tell the story at this event or that event." And I would say, "No, thank you." But it was always no, because of all the I just wanted it to go away in the public, because we had friends, from the aerospace industry, and friends from everywhere, scientists that wanted to study it. And the deal was, stay away from the UFO world, stay away from the public. We want to work with you, see what's going on. And so I just was so happy to be out of the public. I didn't ever want to speak about it again. These people were helping my children understand and cope with school, and made us feel special. And I just want to thank these folks. And so along about Easter, that night, I had this experience. And she said, "You know why I'm here? This is your burden you must bear." And that meant that I was told from the beginning I had to tell this story, what I knew, how I understood it, what happened. And that's all they ever wanted, is me to tell it. So after she came, I knew that was it. I had to tell it, and I was really willing to tell it. But what I didn't know is Dr. Pasulka, which is a very smart individual. I'm telling you, she's a genius, I would say. We just think a lot of her. She came. She had approached MUFON early on, because in her religious studies, she's very, very well known by people within the Vatican. She went to Berkeley. You just study who she is. She was like somebody that could help me with answers. But she was studied. She approached MUFON and said, I want to talk to people that reported angelic encounters." They said, "Well, there's a guy right down the street from you, a couple of hours away, hour and a half away." That so they lined it up. They called me and said, "We have this person we want you to meet. Would you be willing to talk?" And in 2 weeks, I was at a conference after the lady come. I'm in 6 hours away. I drove 6 hours with my youngest son, Ryan, to meet this professor and to tell the story. And so I started telling it about the lady. That's all I wanted to talk about, because it had just happened 2 weeks before. I would have never met her if it hadn't have been for this encounter with this lady. She arranged it. So let's fast forward to June. After I didn't even meet her really that night. I just met her husband, and we talked. Very nice. And she stayed away, arm's length away. Never spoke to me other than a nod. So long about June, July, I get a call from MUFON again. "Would you come speak or come to Wilmington? We don't want you to speak, but Dr. Pasulka is going to be there. She wants to spend a few minutes with you." So I drove down, Ryan and I again. We go to dinner that evening, the whole group, and then we go out on the beach that night, and Diana and I moved down the beach about 20 or 30 yards from the group. They were sky watching, and we began to talk. And she just had a big experience in her life during that time that made her be where she is today.
You're talking about Diana Pasulka.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So here comes October, and Diana calls me, and we've been talking a little bit we never talked from the first time I met her till June or July, and then we talked some from there to, we were like very good study partners now. We're getting into the religious aspect. So she calls me and says, Chris, I'm here in Wilmington, and I'm working on a television project, a movie called The Conjuring, a very prominent horror show. And she said, I'm just being led to introduce you to these guys. They want to meet you. And I'm like, Diana, it would take a miracle for me to meet anybody in the television industry. Just 3.5 years ago, my life was nearly destroyed because I went public, and I'd promised myself I'd never do that again. I said, tell you what, I'm gonna ask for a sign, because this lady told me she would always be there and she would help me to tell the world, to tell my experience. She said, I'll guide you. So this was like on a Monday when she calls me. Long about Thursday, she calls me again. She called me a couple times that week, but she wrote me and she said, have you gotten a sign yet? I said, no, Diane, I haven't got a sign. I'm sorry. She said, well, these guys are leaving Saturday. They're going back to California, and I really wanted you to meet them. I said, I'm sorry, but I haven't had a sign. So on Thursday night, I walk out the back door. This is when I quit smoking, by the way. It's the 13th of October. That brings to me the date. My wife and I were watching television in my study, and I said, I'm going to go out and smoke. So I paused the television, walked out the back door. It had been raining for 2 days. Measured rainfall, about an inch or more rain. It was the grass was wet. I'm out smoking just off the patio, and here she comes out behind me, and when she looks through the back door, she hasn't even opened it yet. These sparks about 100 yards or 75 yards out behind our house, back at the back of the property, we see sparks come off this tree. And it was really weird looking. Little red sparks just went in different directions. And she opened the door and she said, what in the world is going on with that tree? I said, I have no idea. So it did it once or twice more, and then all of a sudden, right in front of she and I, it erupted into flames, 10, 12 feet high. It was just bursted out of the side of this tree, and we're burning that high in the air. Well, she freaks out. You can hear her voice in the video. Ryan takes the video. My mom and dad and everybody sees it. I drag a hose way back there. Had a garden near the area, so we had a hose spigot out. So I bring her a hose pipe, and she personally puts this thing out, sticks the hose up in the tree. It's burned a hole in the side of it. It's really hot, and puts it out. Ryan took video of it and putting it out. This was at 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock that night. Everybody was so messed up about this thing, she couldn't sleep. So 12 o'clock, she looks out the back door, we all do, and now this thing's burning again. It's erupted itself back into flames. So same process. She goes out and puts it out again. 3 o'clock in the morning, it catches on fire the third time. Well, anyhow, the first time it caught a fire at 9 o'clock that night, as it's burning, I text Diane. I said, I got my sign. I'll see you in the morning. So we drove to Wilmington.
That's a sign.
That was it.
That's a sign, Chris. And yep. you're glossing over this just a bit, okay? And I respect that. But let me back up here. The impact that I got from watching this video, and when Chris shot, you can see clearly in the video, and I don't think I misinterpreted this. The flames were coming from inside of the tree. It wasn't on the side. This was self-combusting. It's like spontaneous tree combustion that is happening from inside of the tree. And when you see something like that, how perplexed. Look, you guys are hosing it down. You're putting it out. It's just rained for a couple of days. Everything is nothing catches on fire in nature when things are going down like this. But this tree is has decided to self-combust internally. What's going through your mind? I love Chris's reaction on the video, by the way. I think his reaction was pretty honest. What's going through your mind? Because this is impossible.
Right. Well, that changed. Well, it was kind of, I didn't know what to think. I just knew it was a sign because the lady told me, I will help you. If you'll do this, I'll help you share with the world. Well, let me tell you, from the time she left, from that point on is when I started taking all these videos. For the first 5 years, this stuff would be in my house or over top. The kids were seeing it, all of us. But as soon as I'd pull out a telephone or anything to shoot a picture with, it would disappear. One time it fried a camera. But after that 2012 event is when I started getting all this, these videos and these, and able to share it with people. I mean, as little as last month, a friend of mine, he's become a very good friend now, is Dr. Bob McGuire from Virginia Tech, called me or wrote me at Thanksgiving and said, can I come see you? I'd like to meet you, my wife and I, and talk about doing some aerial tracking, see if we can catch some of it. I said, sure.
Are you talking about Bob McGuire from the Hume Center at Virginia
Yes, sir.
Tech? Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
Now you're in the big leagues. Okay.
All right, so he comes out, and
Okay.
he writes me at Thanksgiving. He comes out in January, for second week of January, I think. And it was here on Friday. He just got here on Friday, so we spent a lot of time chatting, and he and his wife, we all got to meet each other, and it was cloudy and rainy, and then Saturday it rained, and Saturday night it rained, and we're just having a good time of conversation. Well, Sunday night, it started clearing up and got a beautiful sky. We went out to eat, and along about 8 or 8:30, I guess, he would know, we decided we can sky watch. So we go out to my little man cave. I have a little shop in the yard, and I spend a lot of time, and it's just, we live on a cabin on a pond, and it's private back in there. So the back end of the pond is darker. So we walk towards that way, and I just looked up at the heavens, and I asked them, I need a sign if I'm supposed to allow Dr. McGuire to work with me and try to capture some of this on film. And no longer than I said it, right in front of him, he heard me. Within a minute, it started appearing. And it appeared for over an hour, and he's already talked public about it. And I mean, it was really incredible. They were appearing in the trees, orbs, shooting through the trees, and he'll tell the story, but it changed his life. And then his wife, we'll let him tell this, but she had a stroke and was suffering from the consequences of that. And when he goes home, he starts having experiences over the next 5 or 6 days or 2 weeks that were just incredible. And his wife has since been cured from her disability with this stroke. And so, this is what has gone on through the years. And I'll leave him to tell the rest of it, but that's enough there. When you add John Alexander and Chase Klutsky and some folks from Raleigh, they can all attest to this ongoing, and it hears us, and I've got some pretty amazing evidence to share. Some that can't be debunked. Let's put it that way.
Sure, yeah. And the burning tree video is incredible. And before we start to wind this down, I've got less than 10 minutes left. Now that, do you think it's your property, or do you think it's you? Right? Is this a geographical situation that is attracting what is happening, Or do you think that it is because of you?
It's not the property. I have plenty of people that will vouch for it. Like, our friend that introduced us, Lori, she experienced it in Encinitas. I flew out to meet with a bunch of folks, and we walked right out on we drove out on the Pacific Highway and right around Encinitas there. And I told her daughter she was going to experience this stuff. I just knew she would that night. And sure enough, a few minutes later, we were experiencing it close up, and it flew right over our head, two of them, a couple 300 feet high above us, and they joined together like one and just made one object and shot off to the south. So it doesn't matter. It's been here. It's been on anywhere. It's the same sky. I look up in California and see the same stars that I see from my home, and I just ask it to come, and it listens. It hears me, and it answers. I ask for signs. I ask for answers. And if it appears, then that's a big yes. If it doesn't appear, then that's a big no.
You said to me earlier tonight, I'm just going to tell everybody. So Chris and I were talking before the show tonight, and he goes, Jimmy, I'm just going to let you know. I asked everybody, I said, so what about this church guy? And they said affirmative. And that makes me feel pretty good.
I walked out an hour before the show, and I looked up at the sky, and I asked it if it was going to guide me, and if it was what I'm supposed to do tonight. And like I say, I don't do anything unless I get signs for it. And it answered with a big glowing orange orb appeared and flew a piece and disappeared right in front of me. So I knew that I'm in the right hands.
And I appreciate that. And so does the audience. There's another part to this when you say it like that, which is now we are getting into the zone of something spiritual, possibly religious, possibly extraterrestrial. And this is where I stop, Chris, and go, you know what? Just maybe it's all the same thing.
Yep.
Right?
I agree 100%.
Is that where you are today?
Yes, sir. Because the same orbs you see that everybody says, oh, he's into orbs. And I've been saying orbs because that's what appeared in 07. But those same orbs in the daytime are shiny silver disc. And I have a lot of photo of that and video as well. They can be like a metallic object, or they can be a big ball of glowing light. So I think it's all in the same, or including ghosts. And, I have a lot of orb photos with people in them and dogs in them and animals in them. So, and I never could get any of that until the experience with the lady. Nothing. I could not take a photo. But after that, the floodgates opened. And then people like Chase and her husband had an experience, a major experience where we lost time. Then a scientist from Wake Forest University, a government research scientist, she and her assistant came and experienced 2 hours of missing time, and she caught it on camera. She caught audio, video of an entity walking up to the tree, a lot of stuff that I've just never shared, but all these people shared it with me. John Alexander, his book, Reality Denied, he came here 4 or 5 years ago. And my daughter and I and his wife, Victoria, we went down to the river, and almost the same time of night. It was just after dark good, and the stars came out. And we were standing there against my car, and Emily was in the back seat with her feet out the door, and Victoria was in the passenger side back seat with her door closed. So she didn't get to see it, but Emily saw it clear. But I'm standing there with John, and all of a sudden, my hair stood up everywhere. I felt it, this euphoria, where I can hardly breathe. And I said, John, it's here. It's right above us. And about that time, the crickets even stopped chirping, just completely stopped. And 10 seconds, John will tell you, 10 seconds later, it appeared above us in a big pulsating ball of light. It didn't fly over. It wasn't a satellite. It was just not very high above us, 1,000 feet maybe above us. But it appeared out of thin air and started pulsing very brightly and flew off in a hurry to the south. And John put that in his book, second chapter, Reality Denied. So, he's a pretty, it pretty much changed his life that night, too. He saw it.
Well, not only do I want to thank you, you never know who's listening. And as you mentioned Bob McGuire, he just tweeted, by the way. So Bob is listening. And he says, it's not the property. It follows Chris around. And I said, okay, here comes a shout out to Bob. So I tweeted that out. Bob, you got a shout out. And, I got to get Bob on the show. Maybe I can talk him into it. Thank you so much, Chris. Absolutely extraordinary. I can't wait for part 2. And we'll talk about that tomorrow off air. But a great, great conversation tonight. I was really looking forward to this, and so was everybody else. And I feel that we've left so much on the table, but yet we discussed so much. And I want to thank you for taking the time tonight. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you for having me. And I knew going into this tonight. I didn't before, but tonight I knew I was in the right hands, and it's proven to be so. I just want to thank you for this, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And all the best. Have a great, safe rest of your evening. I want you to go out in the backyard and go, yeah, you're right, church wasn't that bad. And maybe you'll get a little visit from an orb. Thank you so much, Chris. Good. And we'll talk tomorrow, man. Have a great night.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Chris Bledsoe. And now, everybody, we just went literally pole to pole. I've got to roll credits and get out of here before I'm cut off on the network. I want to thank Chris Bledsoe for the conversation tonight, and I know that everybody enjoyed. I was on the edge of my seat. Incredible conversation. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Camarion. Shows produced by Hill J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, and Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2020 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, right here, Richard Bleepin' Dolan. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.